Hi, today we are going to read from the book Front Desk by Kelly Yang, chapter 46 through 50. Chapter 46. I wore my new jeans to school every single day, and every evening I put them in the washer and waited around in my pajamas while they dried. I didn't dare let them out of my sight. I was waiting around for my jeans to dry one night when Hank ran into the laundry room. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and he had the biggest smile on his face I'd ever seen. "You're looking at the new security guard down at the mall," he said proudly. "Oh my God," I shrieked. "It worked! The letter worked!" He said. Confetti canyons went off inside me. "You know what else worked? Your letter," he added. I immediately tensed up. Was he mad? Hank chuckled and patted me on the back. "It was bold, I'll tell you that much," he said. "But hey, they bought it." Phew. "How did you find out?" It was the first thing they asked me about. "Tell us about working as a security guard at the Xlvii," he said. "And what did you say?" I asked him. "I said I never worked with nicer people," he said, and I meant it. I smiled. "Can't believe you did that," Hank said, shaking his head. "What possessed you?" I took his hand and led him over to the front office, where I grabbed Lupe's card, the one that said, "You can't win if you don't play." I handed it to him. Hank looked down at the card and pulled me in for a bear hug. That Thanksgiving, we invited all the Weeklies into managers' quarters to celebrate. It was our first real Thanksgiving, and even though my mom didn't know how to make a turkey, she knew how to make turkey sandwiches and buy a pre-made apple pie from Ralph's. Hank brought cherry tomatoes from his tomato plant, too. As the sweet and tangy smell of apple pie and cherry tomatoes and buttery toast filled the manager's quarters, we all went around the table and said what we were thankful for. "I'm thankful for that your mom's okay," my dad said, his eyes smiling at my mom. "Hear, hear," everyone agreed. "I'm thankful for my new job," Hank said, and he raised his soda to me and said, "Thank you, Mia." I smiled. "What about you, Mia?" Mrs. Q asked. "What are you thankful for?" I looked at everyone, at all the love in the room. "I'm thankful for you guys," I said. Chapter 47. With Hank making money again, we no longer had to hide him. Mr. Yao was baffled when he found out what happened. How did that deadbeat sneak back in here, he wanted to know. Still, money was money. And Mr. Yao was happy to take Hank's now that he had it. Hank was happy too, for it meant he could roam around the motel freely again. When I got home from school, I found him sitting up on the roof with Lupe's dad. "What you doing up there?" I called. "I was just helping Jose here with his tools," Hank said. I looked at Jose, who seemed very happy to have some company up there on the roof. "Want to hang out at the desk?" Hank asked. "Nah, it's okay," I said. "Stay, I'll get you guys some sodas." As Hank and Jose sipped sodas on the roof, I went back to the front desk. There were 4 messages waiting for me. Aunt Ling, Uncle Zhu, Aunt Ping, and Uncle Yang had all called to say they went by the addresses I gave them, but none of them had seen the missing Thunderbird. That meant we were down to the final address, the home of Mrs. Robinson. Oh, God, I hope they didn't find the car there. Sometimes when I wanted something really bad, I'd ask myself what I would be willing to give up for it. For example, when I was waiting in the hospital that day my mom got beat up, I asked myself what I would be willing to give up for my mom to be okay. I'd rather be stuck on a bad roller coaster. I decided I would be willing to give up the essay contest. Because I'd rather be stuck on a bad roller coaster with my mom than on a good roller coaster all by myself. Today, as I thought about Mrs. Robinson and what I would give for it not to be her, I looked down at my new jeans. I decided I would be willing to give them up just to prove Mr. Yao wrong. I looked up from my jeans to see a Chinese man running into the motel. He came by foot. He didn't have a car, which was odd for California. As soon as my mom saw him, she dropped her mop. "Zhao Yang!" she cried. "Zhao Ying!" he exclaimed, the warmth of their affection coming through in their greeting. Zhao meant little in Chinese and was something you called dear friends. They hugged each other and jumped with joy. At dinner I learned that Uncle Zhang and my mom used to work together in China. They were both engineers. Uncle Zhang was one of the best engineers we had. He can fix a television in 30 seconds, my mom said, picking up slices of ham with her chopsticks and adding them to his plate. Well, more like a minute, Uncle Zhang said. He and my mom laughed. So when did you get here? My dad asked. About a year ago, Uncle Zhang said. My mother asked him what he had been doing. That's when Uncle Zhang dropped his chopsticks. I don't know how to say this, but He shook his head. What? My mom asked. What is it? Uncle Zhang's eyes watered. Oh, Ying, I'm in an awful mess, he said quietly. Slowly he began to tell us what happened. Shortly after he came to America, he got a job working in a kitchen. The employer was an American guy and told all the workers that their passports and IDs would be safer with him, so he took them all away. Without their passports and IDs, the workers had no way to leave. Month after excruciating month, they put up with long hours, toiling away in a hot kitchen with virtually no pay. We work 18 hours a day, from 6 a.m. to midnight. We only get 1 day off a month, said Uncle Zhang. At night, Uncle Zhang and the other workers slept at the employer's house in a basement with no windows. I'm basically a slave, he cried. I only got out today because the immigration came and raided us, so everyone had to flee through the secret tunnels. What secret tunnels? I asked. He told us that inside the restaurant there was a closet in the kitchen with a white apron. Behind the white apron there was a button. If you pushed the button, the closet wall would open up and you could crawl out. The secret tunnels led to hiding places and directly outside. We never thought it would happen, but today, immigration showed up, Uncle Zhang said. As soon as the immigration officers walked through the door, one of the waitresses came into the kitchen and put in an order for ice-fried rice. That was the code. One by one, Uncle Zhang and the other workers slipped inside the closet and crawled out through the tunnels. When I got out, I kept looking up at the sky so vast and blue, Uncle Zhang said. It's been ages since I'd seen the light of day. And how did you manage to find us? My mom asked. Oh, that part was easy. Every Chinese waiter up and down the coast of California knows about this place. Look out for the blue cap, they say. You guys are famous. Uncle Zhang said with a wink. Then Uncle Zhang's face fell, and he got real quiet. But I have to go back. They still have my passport and ID. My mom shook her head. There's got to be something you could do. Uncle Zhang shook his head right back. It's my own fault, he said. I should never have taken the job in the first place. Why did you? My mom asked. Because I was desperate. Uncle Zhang swallowed hard. I got into some trouble with loan sharks. Chapter 48. Uncle Zhang had borrowed $500 from some loan sharks when he first came to America, just as Uncle Ming had. It wasn't even for myself. It was for my mom back home. She was very sick, and I thought, he could barely finish. You thought maybe if you paid for an expensive doctor, she might get better? My dad said, glancing at my mom. My mom slipped her hand into his. Uncle Zhang shook his head. It wasn't even that. She had stage 4 cancer. It had already spread. There was nothing they could do, he said. So then, his eyes grew moist, his voice shaky. I borrowed the money so she could die knowing her only son was okay out there. That I had made it in America instead of the loser. Uncle Zhang started crying. Listen to me. You're not a loser, my dad said. None of us knew it was going to be like this. I couldn't even say goodbye. Uncle Zhang bit down on his lower lip. I was afraid if I called her, she'd hear it in my voice, how much I was struggling, so I just refused. No matter how many times she asked for me at the end, I refused to get on the phone with her. My mom put a hand on Uncle Zhang's shoulder. None of us said a word. I sat very still, thinking about my own secrets that I was keeping from my parents. My missing pencil, the C- lurking in my closet. I thought about my parents and how they almost never wanted to call or write to my grandparents or to Shen's family. And if we called them, my mother always rushed to get off the phone. Either that or she'd put on the same voice she used at Macy's when she said, "Just looking." As the hazy sky turned into night, my parents, Uncle Zhang, and I gazed out the window, thinking of all the things we wanted to say to our parents, but couldn't. In the middle of the night, I got out of bed and went over to my mom and dad's bed. My dad was snoring peacefully. I hesitated for just a second. He got so little sleep, my dad, before shaking him awake. "Dad," I whispered. "Huh? Did a customer come in?" he asked, jerking his eyes open and sitting up. "I'll be right there." "No, Dad, it's just me," I said. "I can't sleep. I keep thinking about Uncle Zhang and his passport." "I know," my dad sighed. "Me too." "What's he going to do?" "I don't know, honey," my dad said. "Hopefully he can meet someone who can help him." "Like who?" "A lawyer, maybe," my dad said. "What can a lawyer do for him?" I asked. My dad thought about it. "A lawyer will be able to tell his employer what's what," he said. "Well, why can't we tell people what's what?" I asked him. He chuckled. "We can, sweetheart, but nobody's going to listen to us," he said. That's not true, I thought. Hank's new employer, he listened. My dad rolled back on his side. "There's nothing you could do, sweetheart," he said. "Now try to get some sleep." I went back to my room, but I did not go to sleep. Instead, I pulled out a piece of paper from my drawer and Mrs. T's big old dictionary thesaurus, which I still had from when I wrote Hank's letter. With the flashlight, I started writing. And her letter has lots of cross-outs in it so that you can understand what I'm talking about when I say cross that out. Dear employer, I am writing to you about your employee, Zhang Xlviii. Mr. Zhang says, cross that out, has told, cross told out, informed me that you have, cross out have, are in possession of his passports and ID. It is wrong, cross that out, illegal to take away, cross out take away, to confiscate someone's passport and ID. You gotta give it back, cross out you gotta give it back. I request your cross out quick, immediate return of Mr. Zhang's passport and ID. If you don't do it, you'll be sorry. Cross that sentence out. Failure to do it will result in big trouble. Cross out big trouble. Serious consequences. And don't lie and say you did it because I'm going to ask Mr. Zhang. Cross out that sentence. I will be asking, cross out asking, I will be following up with Mr. Zhang to see if you have returned the passport and ID. Thank you for your attention. Sincerely, Mia Tang, lawyer. I worked on the letter all night, making sure the tone, punctuation, and syntax was all right. I read it over 5 times, and when I was pretty sure I had it corrected all the grammatical mistakes, I copied it onto a clean sheet white of paper. Before I left for school, I handed Uncle Zhang the letter. "This is for you," I told him. "I don't know if it'll work, but it's worth a shot." I watched as his eyes danced across my writing. "You wrote this?" he asked. "Well, I had a thesaurus," I said. "Mia, this is incredible," he said. I blushed. "I hope it works for you, Uncle Zhang," I said, hugging him. "Me too," he said, clutching the letter. "Me too." Chapter 49. After Uncle Zhang left, we got a call from one of the other immigrants. He had been over to Mrs. Robinson's house, and the stolen neon green Ford Thunderbird was not there. I looked down at my lucky jeans and thought, phew. With the car officially nowhere to be found, I felt it was only appropriate that I personally tell the owner, Mr. Lorenz. So I opened up the ledger, looked up his phone number, and gave him a call. When he didn't pick up, I glanced at his address and was surprised to see that he lived right here in Anaheim, a couple blocks from my school, actually. After school, Lupe and I went over to his house. Mr. Lorenz lived in a small yellow house on Orange Avenue. We walked up and knocked on the door. "Hello, Mr. Lorenz?" I called. "Anyone home?" Lupe cupped her hands and tried to peer through the windows. We heard rustling and footsteps. Finally, the door opened a crack. "Who's asking?" Mr. Lorenz said. "It's me, Mia, the girl from the Cala Vista. Where your car got stolen?" I said. "And this is my friend Lupe." Lupe waved at Mr. Lorenz. "Hey," she said. "Can we come in?" I asked him. Mr. Lorenz didn't let us in right away. He paused to think about it, and then finally he sighed and undid the chain on it to his door. His house had a funky smell, like somebody had been cooking stinky tofu and forgot to open the window. Lupe wrinkled her nose as we took a seat on the couch. "This better be quick," Mr. Lorenz said. "Don't worry, this will only take a minute," I said. "I just wanted to come over and tell you personally that we cannot find your car." "That's okay," he said. "The insurance company has already comped me." "I know, but still, it's important, you know." "Is that it?" Mr. Lorenz snapped. Just then we heard a loud vroom. A car came speeding down the road and parked right in front of Mr. Lorenz's house. We glanced out the window. Our eyes stretched when we registered the color. Neon green. "Hey, isn't that—" Lupe asked. Yes, it was. It was a neon green Thunderbird. The neon green Thunderbird. The driver of the car got up and walked up to the house. He turned the doorknob. "Hey, man, you said the car was in perfect condition, but the windshield's got all these dents in it," the guy said, tossing the keys to Mr. Lorenz. Then he looked at us. "Who are you?" he asked. "We're just—" Lupe said. "Leaving," I announced. I grabbed Lupe's hand and lunged for the door, but Mr. Lorenz was quicker than me. He slammed the door shut with one hand. "Not so fast," he said. "Where do you think you're going?" "Home," I said, and I glanced at Lupe. Sweat beads were falling like raindrops from her forehead. "We got to go home and do our homework, right, Lupe?" "Yeah, we have a lot of homework." "And when you're done doing your homework, what are you going to say?" Mr. Lorenz asked. He leaned into us. I could feel the hairs rising on my neck. "About what you saw." My breath caught in my throat. "Nothing," I said. "I didn't see anything." "Me neither," said Lupe. He stared at us. Desperately, I tried to erase my thoughts so he couldn't read them. "Good," he said. His wet lips twisted into a smirk. He crouched down and whispered into our ears, "Breathe a word about this to anyone, and I will come and find you." The threat grabbed me and smothered me as I ran all the way home. Chapter 50. I sat at the front desk waiting for Hank to get home. He and Fred had gone to an Angels baseball game. It was getting to be rush hour. I stared at the cars crawling down Coast Boulevard, muttering, come on, under my breath. When at last I spotted Hank's pickup coming down the road, I ran outside, waving my arms. Breathlessly, I told him and Fred what happened. "I knew it," Hank said, throwing his Angels baseball cap onto the ground. "What'd I tell you, Fred? It was an inside job. The guy probably thought he could pull a 30-day special." "What's a 30-day special?" I asked. "A 30-day special is when someone reports his car got stolen, but it's not really stolen," Fred said. "He's just hiding it for 30 days. "Why 30 days?" "Because that's how long most insurance companies take to settle the claim," Hank explained. "The insurance company probably gave him a big fat check for the price of the car." "And what happens to the car?" Hank shrugged. He could try to sell it to someone or sell it for parts. That's probably what he was doing when we went over there, I said. We have to call the police. I grabbed the phone and dialed the number for Officer Phillips. This time, Officer Phillips actually listened. He and his colleagues went straight over to Mr. Lorenz's house, where they watched him for a while and eventually caught him red-handed trying to sell his stolen car. They arrested him on the spot for insurance fraud, money laundering, and a whole bunch of other bad stuff I'd never even heard of before. He'll be going away for a long, long time, Officer Phillips said when he came over later that night. That was a relief, considering the last thing Mr. Lorenzo had said to me. Officer Phillips shook my hand and thanked me for cracking the case. I was all smiles. My mom and dad joked that maybe I could get a job on the force one day. Officer Phillips chuckled and was about to turn to leave when I nudged him and pointed toward Hank's room. Officer Phillips sighed, but he followed me over. Hank answered on the first knock, then frowned when he saw who it was. Officer Phillips looked similarly unthrilled, but nevertheless, he muttered an apology for having wrongly accused Hank. Do you know what that cost me? It cost me my job, Hank said. Again, I'm sorry, Officer Phillips said flatly. Hank looked him straight in the eye. Don't be sorry. Be better, Hank said. Next time you accuse a black man, stop and think. Officer Phillips looked away and didn't say anything. That night, my mother and father came into my room. We're proud of you, they said. Even though you went into a stranger's house, my mom tissed, but I could tell she wasn't really mad. They took a seat at the foot of my bed, and my mother reached for my hand. Do you still remember asking me a while back why we came to America, she asked. This is why, she said. Because of 30-day specials, I asked. My mom chuckled and shook her head. No, sweetheart, she said, because here people are innocent until proven guilty. For the most part, at least. That's what you saw tonight. Slowly, my parents started telling me about something that happened in China a long time ago called the Cultural Revolution. The Cultural Revolution was a political movement that took place in China in the 1960s and 70s. My parents said that during the Cultural Revolution, my grandparents were locked up and shipped away. It didn't matter whether they actually did anything wrong. That's why we left, so that something like that wouldn't happen to you, my dad said. Tonight, seeing that police officer arrest Mr. Lorenzo and actually come back here and apologize to Hank. Okay, he didn't really want to apologize, but still he did. I know I made the right decision. America may not be perfect, but she's free. And that makes all the difference. And I finally understood what my parents meant by free. And that's the end of chapter 50. So we'll have to wait and tune in again for the next chapters.